speaker is somebody who found out what it means when you say, Dottie, what can I do? We've all heard that, I know. I had contacted an organization who said they were going to have a speaker for us today, and they didn't get back, and and finally I was kind of, and so our wonderful minister, Reverend Gloria McCray, called me a week ago and said, is there any time I could do a service for you? I got one for
And she got a whole week to prepare. So
she had a whole week to prepare, unlike Janet, who sometimes has a whole 10 minutes.
Or Eileen.
It was so wonderful to have her just jump in. And so I said, okay, it's yours. And as I'm going to say that again, the newest person we have here attending at CCL as a reverend is the Reverend Gloria. And she likes to be called Glory.
Glory.
I've all been in the same place you are.
And good, glorious morning indeed. I'm going to walk in front of you because I got something to say.
You want a microphone?
Yeah, you gotta take the
I
microphone.
have to take it? Okay.
Well, it's for the recording.
Oh, I see. And I do want it recorded. So,
When I left the house this morning, I asked my daughter, did I put on all my colors? I wanted every color that I could find. Okay? And she says, I think you got them all. And I have one of these on the thing at the house, and when I walked in, I was like, oh, I forgot my thing. So my big brother gave me his. It's on the floor, but I got it. So although I'm very colorful, I thought of a scripture where it said, look at the birds of the field and the flowers of the garden. And yet, not Solomon in all his glory is not as beautifully arrayed as each of you sitting in front of me today. So I am so gloriously blessed to be in your presence and so honored and so grateful to get to share with you our commemoration of the late, great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Now I'm going to do a little something a bit unorthodox here, so just rock with me here for just a moment. This is a little off the beaten path.
It's hard to be on the beaten path here.
So,
Hard to be off of that beaten path here.
I just said that.
oh, nothing wrong with support. Support. Okay? So, I'm going to change clothes.
Yay! Oh. You want the music? Cue music.
And I bet you thought you were the first person to strip here. Nope, that's not true.
Gloria, we got some stories for you.
I'm learning as I go and quite fascinated at that. So, one of the things that happened was Dottie sent over a printout that she had done, Reverend Gloria, and I wanted to put on my long white robe and be all pious and just all preachy and reverend-ish, right? Well, I'm sorry, folks, this is all I got.
Yay! She's a druid.
I love your wife.
Okay.
Can I give a plug for your work? She is a massage therapist at a spa.
So on Tuesday, I had a most magnificent day because I took a spa day. I try to get a mental health day at least once a week. But sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But this time I got a chance to go into the spa. And one of the things that happened is I got to walk right into the spa. Just go up those stairs, walk right up to the front desk, and say, may I have a key, please? I didn't have to go under the sign that said colored. I didn't have to avoid the sign that said white people only. So now as I give you this presentation today, I want the question to come across your mind was, how much does this cost? And I am employed at a very nice spa. And when I walked right in, the people that I worked with treated me like I was their prestige VIP customer for the day. Good morning, how are you? Here's your key, open the door for me. Let me know that there were attendants at hand to help me with whatever. I went into a room a few minutes later and I undressed in a room full of other ladies. Asians, Russians, East Indians, Hispanics, and yes, white women and black women. And a few minutes later, I went down to get into the jacuzzi tub. Big old hot tub. Woo! I was living high. Me and my brown skin. All up in that place. 50 years ago, that would not have been the case.
Say that.
Okay? And as I got down into that nice, comfortable hot water, I thought about my mother. My mother's 87 years old. Her mind has succumbed to dementia. Her heart is weak. Her body is riddled with degenerative joints that are achy and stiff and painful. And I sank into that water and it massaged my body and I thought about my mother. And I wished that she could have that experience. Wow. 87 years old, never being able to have that sort of experience. And I remembered when I took her one time to a spa pedicure, okay? Now, she's a little feeble, so I dropped her off, and the ladies came and met us at the door and was ushering her in, and I said, give her whatever she wants. And so they ushered her to a chair, helped her get into it and everything, and I came back in. So she was kind of looking like this, and I'm like, it's okay, Mommy, it's okay, just calm down. She had a little trouble adjusting to someone serving her.
Oh.
Okay? And I watched her as she looked at me when they came and gave her like a tray to take a choice of drinks. Asked her, did she want the massage chair turned on? She looked at me and I said, it's okay, Mommy. It's paid for. I watched her adjust to the contrast of light-colored hands washing her dark-colored feet. I saw her head tilt with gratitude, accepting the warm smile of a young woman who was serving her. Every now and then she would lean over and say, baby, how much this cost? And I'd say, it's okay, Mommy. It's paid for. I remember how she moaned softly when a young lady came over and massaged her dark, wrinkled hands. I remember the tenderness of those hands as she washed clothes and made food for a white family. I remember one day in particular that this young woman just fell into her bosom and they cried together. And later, while I was playing in the floor in the kitchen with the white children, when we went home, I said, Mommy, why y'all was crying? And she said, baby, because the times, they're changing. So I came back to my Tuesday reality, and of course I was overwhelmed with the gratitude flowing through my mind, my heart, and my body. I was free to enjoy this as long as I desired. I had access to abundance and beauty all around me. And in a few minutes, a white woman came and got right down into the same pool with me. 2 Asian ladies came in. The Hispanic lady came, and the black ladies came. And I looked at my brown skin, and I looked that there were no separations. There were no signs that said we couldn't do or enjoy any of this. And I thought about my mother's dark skin. And in my heart, I said, indeed, Mommy, the times are changing. And I thank you for your years and your tears. I thank you for the years of service, and may your soul know from the distance that your desires and dreams for us to have a better life have at least propelled us to this place, this day. I'm grateful for my spa day. Now, as I left the spa, I walked out into the sunshine, and I said, it's okay, Gloria. it's paid for. Today, all over the country, we're joining to some degree to commemorate the words and deeds of many who made some of those payments. I hope you got a chance to see that we're going to have a video, so when I'm finished speaking, we'll give you some more of that presentation. But I hope that something today causes you to ask as I do. I hope that something today helps you to realize, as I do, that there were installments made between the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's speech entitled, "I Have a Dream," and the last one he made entitled, "I've Been to the Mountaintop." And I want to ask you, where are you between "I Have a Dream" and "I've Been to the Mountaintop"? I recognize that where I am today was impacted by the dreams, words, actions of ministers, activists, humanitarians, people who made sacrificial choices to change the times. On August 28th, in 1963, during the March on Washington on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, Dr. King gave reference to the Emancipation Proclamation. It was signed 100 years before, freeing the slaves, and he reminded America that 100 years later, the Negro is still not free. So I'm going to ask Sister Dr. Eileen here to come up for just a moment, and we're going to rewind, because she has a little piece of information to tell us about what was going on before the slaves became free.
Wow.
As many of you know, my family was blessed to welcome a young man who was born and raised in Ghana. And I had the tremendous honor of going there and walking the soil that part of my people left a very, very long time ago. Ghana was one of the main ports for slavery. And the place where they were held is still there. The chains that they wore are still there. And the most significant thing that is still there is an archway that led out to the docks that was written in many dialects so that all of the slaves going through would read, "You will never return." The idea was they didn't want them to have hope, that in order to survive what was meant to be, they were going to have to give up the hope that they would ever come back. Now, through the works of Dr. King and countless others whose names will never be known, the words are being slowly spiritually washed off that wall. Because I returned. And many will. Africa is, scientists believe that it is the cradle of humanity. It is all of our homes. And we all can go home now.
Thank you so much. We were discussing that a few nights ago, and I never knew that tidbit, and I thought that was wonderful. I wanted it shared with us. So some of you got some little orange slips, and I'd ask you at the end of service to just walk up to somebody and read what's on your slip. Those are quotes from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. One of my favorite quotes in the "I Have a Dream" speech was the one where he said, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character."
That's right. That's right.
And then later on in that speech, he says, "Let freedom ring, let freedom ring." And he goes on to say, "Let freedom ring through the hills and counties until all God's children can stand together and sing, 'Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last.'" But Dr. King's legacy revealed that freedom is not free. As we look back on his story, we see that the road to his reception of the Nobel Peace Prize for combating racial inequality through nonviolence in 1964 was paved with police brutality, imprisonment, injustice, and injunctions. In 1964, after years of struggles and demonstrations of public discontent, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act. That act was supposed to outlaw discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. And yet, 50 years later, in 1965, Dr. King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference helped to organize the Selma to Montgomery marches. These marches called the attention of the American public to address the issues of racial injustice in our nation. This year marks the 50th anniversary of that 54-mile civil rights marches. And in commemoration, these marches have taken place on the Freedom Trains for the last 30 years. And there's another among us whom I would like to ask to give us a personal account of her relationship with Dr. King. Jen.
Well, I had the privilege, being a young woman, just entering into high school, I had the privilege to march with Reverend Martin Luther King in Oakland. And it was a short march, but I had the opportunity to do that as a white person. And I was taken care of by two sponsors that were an African-American couple. So they stood on either side of me so that I would be protected.
Wow.
And it was amazing. My mother had to work that day that we had the march, and so she entrusted me into their care. And they actually said, "Would you like to meet Dr. King?" And I, of course, my eyes were huge. I said, "I would love to meet Dr. King." And so I went up, and they introduced me along with several other people that got introduced to him. And he said, "Janet," he said, "thank you for being here." And I said, "It's my honor." And then he said, "Do you have a question for me?" I said, "What is your favorite food?" And I said,
and he said chicken.
He said fried chicken and grits. So this was so amazing because I said, "That's my favorite food too." And when I met him, his energy, and all of us in here can read energy, his energy is huge. Like if you look at that photo of him, his energy is huge. Yet he wasn't physically very tall.
Oh, really?
No. He was not physically very tall. He was maybe 5'5", 5'4". He wasn't much taller than I was. And as I looked at him and his energy, his spiritual energy, and the fire in his eyes, and the kindness in his smile, his energy was miles big. And I want you to remember that he was so in the present moment with his spiritual connection that he imbued and embodied that highest spiritual energy. He was incredibly powerful. Incredibly powerful. And his powerful expression came through his gentleness. And that he would, deign to speak, take time out of his busy schedule to say hello to a white girl.
Thank you so much. So now let's go and fast forward here just a little bit. Because on April 3rd, 1968, Dr. King gave his last speech. I've been to the mountaintop. This was mere hours before his untimely death. And in the context of this speech, Dr. King charged the leaders of this nation to be true to what you put on paper, he said. And he said, somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. And somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest for what is right. And he stated that there were difficult days ahead, but that he wasn't afraid of them. And I quote, "For I've been to the mountaintop, and mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord." Now I'm going to give you a little bit of statistics. Since his departure, beginning in 1971, many cities began having Martin Luther King Day celebrations. And at the same time, the Supreme Court upheld busing as a legitimate means for achieving integration in public schools against public protest. In 1986, Martin Luther King Day became a federal holiday. But in 1992, race riots erupted in South Central LA after the acquittal of 4 white police officers in the videotaped beating of Rodney King. Public protest against police brutality and racial injustice, and that is still alive and well in our nation today. The LA police also began to crack down on Latino immigrants after the Los Angeles Rebellion. And in 1994, right here in California, you had Proposition 187, which would prevent undocumented immigrants from obtaining education and healthcare public services. Now that act was made unconstitutional 3 years later, in 1997. National surveys between 1980 and 1991 found widespread discrimination in employment and at least a 14% increase of reported hate crimes against gay men, lesbians, bisexuals, and transgendered individuals. The terrorist event of 9/11, 2001, sharply increased the incidence of hate crimes, harassment, and police profiling against the Arab Americans and others of Middle Eastern descent. Even though racially motivated murders and church burnings were committed on election night of 2008, January 20th of 2009, America inaugurated our first Negro, colored, black, African American president. In October of 2011, Washington held the ceremonial dedication of the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, which stands at 1964 Independence Avenue. This was years and years of planning, and you better believe great opposition. And during that same time, according to the FBI, there are reported statistics that over 6,000 criminal incidents in 2011 were the result of bias toward race, religion, or sexual orientation. And today there are many, many images fresh in our hearts and minds of the most recent acts of violence and destruction spawned by racism, brutality, injustice. Today we can quote another truth spoken by Dr. King. Our scientific power has outrun our spiritual power. We have guided missiles and misguided men. Speaking as one who holds dear the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King, I assure you, America is not free. Our freedoms are not free. And although we are freely invited to enjoy many comforts as long as we like, we must not become complacent. It's time to get out of the hot tub, get dressed, and pay the bill. What will we do to cover the cost of our rights to the freedom of assembly, the freedom of speech, the freedom of the press, and our rights as Americans to protest for what is right? Where are you between I have a dream and I've been to the mountaintop? I assure you that all of our children are not yet living in a nation where they're not judged by the color of their skin. And our complacency will only hinder their growth and development of their character. We must continue to work until we too see the glory of the coming of the Lord. So will you join me as I slip out of my comfy spa robe and slippers and exchange them for the robes of humanitarian service and the walking shoes of peace? Will you join me in rolling up my sleeves and joining in the ongoing work of remembrance of those who paid it forward for us by the continued support of those activists, ministers, humanitarians right here in this room with us, serving our communities, our society, America, and the world? We've got Reverend Dottie Boone and Reverend Eileen helping to hold open the doors of love and acceptance here at CCL and reaching out abroad all the way to Ghana for an orphanage in Africa. We got my big brother, Ronnie, okay, opening our hearts with his ministry of song and big beingness for others. We've got Mel serving the homeless with his socks. Okay? We've got Sister Janet Childs letting her little candle lights shine all over the community with her service to Living with Dying and so many other organizations.
Yes.
We've got our little sister Carolyn who's opened her heart and home to a young mother and an infant.
Yes.
And she brings them into our garden to nurture.
Yeah.
There's going to be some character development there. Okay?
We're the village.
Yes. And these are only a few of the ones of us among who have touched my life personally in amazing ways just by being led by the spirit of love that resides within each one of us. Each and every one of us has that same spirit. Each and every one of us makes a daily contribution to the dreams that we hold for our children and our children's children. So I say, do whatever you can, in any small way that you can, every day that you can. And I always say, do it 3G, giving God glory.
Yeah.
What can you do? I'm so glad you asked.
Tell it, girlfriend.
Get on board that freedom train.
Yes.
Tomorrow, some of us will join many others in riding on the last voyage of the freedom train. The Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Association of Santa Clara Valley has chartered Caltrain as its freedom train. The Caltrain Freedom Train is the only remaining of the nation's more than 24 official MLK commemorative train services launched 30 years ago by Coretta Scott King in honor of her husband. The trains were launched to commemorate the 54-mile march from Selma to Montgomery. These were led by Dr. King, and they proved instrumental in the passage of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. I encourage any of you, all of you, to at least take part in this historic event. Now I'd like to close with a little prayer that Reverend Dottie shared with me that was written by Dr. King. Eternal God, out of whose mind this great cosmic universe was created, we bless you. Help us to seek that which is high and noble and good. Help us in the moment of difficult decisions to work with renewed vigor for a warless world, a better distribution of wealth, and a brotherhood that transcends race or color. And today may we add gender or sexual orientation. We are grateful. Blessed be.
Blessed be. Whoa.
Wow.